Hello there, welcome to this guide on development. We're going to be talking about how development works, expertise, your handling your cost cap, and generally how you can use a design to basically, make a championship winning car. So we'll be going through basically every aspect in order. It's going to take a little bit of time, but we'll get through there in the end. Let's start off with your development slots here. We have 4 this year. Every team starts with 4, and we kind of want to try and keep these running as much as possible. The main limiter is going to be your cost cap and your finances, but again, we're going to go over that a little bit later. For this year, we have the same 6 parts as last year, but they've changed a lot on how development works. For instance, the shortest project is now 30 days, the longest one is 45, and if we use an additional 5 engineers, we can cut that down by about a third, meaning that a 45-day project becomes 30, and a 20-day project becomes, well, 20. The cost of the project has also changed, the cheapest one being 700,000. The most expensive one being 1.6, but generally most of these are going to be between 1 to 1.6 million, meaning that again your finances and your cost cap are going to be your main limiter potentially on how you can design and develop your car. So again, keep that in mind. We'll go over that a little bit later. Now, in this year's game, we still have expertise, but it's a little bit more hidden, and expertise is still going to be the most important factor for your car's development. Expertise is generally a stat that represents how well your engineers understand this aspect of a part. So what this means is that for this chassis here, we actually have 3 expertise stats. We have drag reduction, engine cooling, and airflow middle. And these are unique to the chassis. For instance, your drag reduction stat on your chassis or expertise will not carry over to your drag reduction on your rear wing. They all have independent expertise, and every single one of these stats have their own expertise that we kind of have to raise, well, individually. However, when you design parts, your expertise will actually rise up equally, meaning that no matter how we use these sliders, for the expertise gain, it's going to be equal across all 3 in this case, so you don't really need to worry about that. You can move the sliders around as you see fit, and the expertise gains will be equal across every, well, aspect. If you do it, doesn't matter which part you do it on, it works the exact same way. If we do that rear wing, which has 6, it's going to be equally shared among those 6. And again, don't worry, it's going to be basically raised just as quickly on the rear wing as it would be on the chassis, even though it has more expertise stats. So that is basically how expertise works. You don't need to worry about the sliders. It is, a hidden stat. And there are a few ways to, raise it quicker. One of them is CFD and wind tunnel, which we can actually explain pretty quickly here. So CFD and wind tunnel hours are pretty straightforward. You add them to a part, and they give you extra stats, but they also give extra expertise. And that is going to be the main thing about them, the fact that they give extra expertise. Now, for every unit you add, so in this case we've added 5.7 or 57 units of CFD, and for wind tunnel we've added 76 or 76 units. Combine them together and we end up with 133. We've added 133 units to this chassis project now, and if we were to do this project, the way that wind tunnel CFD hours works for expertise is that they add an additional day of expertise gain. Meaning that, let's say that we were to do this project on normal, which takes 30 days. Once this project's finished, it would be as if we gained 163 days worth of expertise. So CFD and wind tunnel will give you a huge amount of extra expertise, but it's mainly going to be through, well, the expertise gain of the part. Expertise is going to be gained daily too. So if we say add more engineers or use rushed, which speeds things up, we're going to be getting more expertise per day, but we're going to be getting less expertise in total than if we allow to do it like this. So basically, if you want the most efficient expertise gain, it is to run every project on normal with 1 engineer. And again, that is for basically most efficient expertise gain from expertise to money. But the main thing here is, of course, we do want to make parts that are kind of ready for the races where we need them. So don't be afraid of using engineers. Don't be afraid to use rushed if it's really, really necessary. But again, rushed is going to add 1.5 time modifier to the price. So honestly, only use this if you really have to. Wouldn't really recommend that. Intense, on the other hand, is kind of a different thing. It doesn't really change the completion times, but it adds a 1.5 modifier to your expertise at 3 times the cost. So it's going to give you more expertise quicker, but it's going to cost you 3 times as much. So generally only use intense if you kind of have the room in your cost cap. If you don't have it, don't use it. Now, next up here, we're going to be talking a little bit about a new thing that they've added, and that is this stat down here, the lifespan. The lifespan for your part basically decides how many races it is before you have to replace it with a new one, provided, of course, your drivers doesn't crash and destroy it. And you can increase lifespan or decrease lifespan. It's basically durability. Now, if you look at us, look at the stats on the right. If we increase the lifespan, we're actually going to be losing a lot of performance. However, if we decrease lifespan, we're actually going to be gaining a lot of performance. Generally, I'd say minimizing lifespan is going to be worth it from a performance perspective. Of course, you're going to need to manufacture a few extra components over the course of a year, but the performance that you gain is going to be more than worth it. I really recommend you do this. Keep minimum lifespan of all parts. Of course, if you want more of a challenge, feel free to turn it up, but generally, minimum lifespan will be more than enough. Because even anytime your driver has an incident, crashes, if it's just a little scratch, minimal damage, you're going to have to replace the part anyways. So I'd take the extra performance over, say, extra durability. That most likely isn't even going to be able to live its full life because it's going to be destroyed either by your driver crashing or different driver crashing into your driver. So I'd say minimum lifespan is the way to go. And honestly, yeah, I'd really recommend that. Now, next up, I'm going to just explain quickly what these stats mean before we go into how you can basically design your first edition of parts. So your top speed is pretty self-explanatory. It's the top speed of your car. It isn't a super important stat. It still has value, but I wouldn't say it's super important. I would basically not worry too much about it. Acceleration, on the other hand, is kind of interesting because it is highly tied to your engine this year, meaning that you shouldn't focus too much on racing it. Depending on your engine, you will not be able to really catch up to other teams. Red Bull will have the highest acceleration, so keep that in mind. Mainly tied to your engine, not really something you can focus on with development. DRS effectiveness is a new stat, which is basically, well, your DRS bundled into one. It will have an effect on how quickly you can accelerate, how quickly your top speed under DRS, and basically just how well your DRS works. It is only found in your rear wing, which means that your rear wing is going to be your main focus. For DRS, drag reduction most likely, but we'll go over what I would do with the parts later on in terms of specialization. Now, the cornering stats are pretty self-explanatory. Cornering for low, medium, and high speed, I'd say, are still your most important stats to race. These will be basically, as I said, the most important ones. You should focus on these for the most part. Dirty air cornering is, well, dirty air tolerance, or dirty air cornering, as I just said, is basically how well your car follows another car. Basically how much time you're going to be losing in the slipstream behind another car if you get close. And a higher dirty air tolerance is going to make it easier to overtake, and it's also going to make it easier to, make sure that your tires doesn't get too hot. Generally, though, a good number for this would probably be 50 to 60. That would probably be kind of where you start to not notice any more increases in performance. 50 to 60 should be good for this one. Now, brake cooling and engine cooling are kind of been reworked this year. Brake cooling has mostly to do now with how hot your tires get. A higher brake cooling will help to keep them cooler, which will allow you to push more. And of course, it should also have an effect on your lockups, although I haven't actually gotten that kind of confirmed. But again, mainly the main effect of your brake cooling this year is going to be preventing your tires getting too hot. And once again, a good number here would be 50 to 60%. After that, you won't be seeing too much in terms of gains. But again, 50 to 60 would be a nice number to focus on. Engine cooling is pretty important this year. It has to do with your powertrain. Basically, your powertrain weight is kind of linked to your engine heat. So your engine cooling is a very important stat because they have changed how much the engine components cost. A new engine is 5 million, a new ERS is 2.5 million, and a new gearbox is 1 million. These two go under your cost cap, so if you have to buy 2 new engines during a year, that's basically 10% of your cost cap gone. So keep in mind that having this stat high can basically allow you to develop a lot more over the course of a season. But of course, crashes, incidents, accidents, things you don't really have any control over can still happen. So again, I'd say this part is, this stat is fairly important. Now, I'll be going over the 6 car parts and generally how I would set up a starter, but feel free to comment on any questions you have. Design isn't really super complicated this year. You start a project, you gain expertise daily, and it doesn't matter where your sliders are going. You're still going to get equal expertise across everything, so don't worry about that. Now, as I said, we'll be going a little bit through how I would make a starter car, but before we do that, we need to understand how certain stats work. For instance, your brake cooling is going to be mainly found in your suspension, and some are going to be found in your front wing. But the most of it, and the most efficient way of racing it, is to do it so on your suspension. Same for the engine cooling. Most of it is going to be found on your side pods. You're going to be finding a little bit on your chassis, but mainly on your side pods. It'll be far more effective to race it there. Rear wing is going to be your main source of probably top speed and DRS effectiveness. So again, mainly race it here. And your underfloor is kind of a jack of all, master of none. What's it called? Yeah, I think that's the phrase I might have butchered. Your underfloor is basically kind of good at everything. It's not great at anything, but it's kind of good at everything. So I would say for your safety and wind tunnel time, I'd probably invest the first 2 periods into my underfloor in order to get it up and running and kind of be the backbone that gives us a very good starting point to work from. Now, the way that I will probably put together my first car here is very simple. We're going to be maximizing certain aspects like brake cooling for the suspension here, minimizing lifespan, probably sacrifice drag reduction, medium speed, high speed, to make a part here that, as you can see, loses a little bit of top speed, but gains a lot of low speed cornering, gains a little bit of medium, loses a little bit of high speed, and gains a lot of brake cooling, which, as we said, was important. Now, the opposite of that, of course, the front wing. We can also do kind of same with that thing. We can actually add remove the lifespan. We could also make a front wing that is very focused on low speed cornering, while also increasing, say, a little bit on the medium side of things, potentially. But honestly, I would kind of sacrifice a little bit of brake cooling here to just get a little bit of front wing, particularly early on. This could actually be a pretty good one. We're going to be losing a little bit of dirty air tolerance, which isn't great. But we're going to be gaining a lot of low speed cornering, which is kind of hard to come by. And at the same time, we're getting a little bit of stats on the other two. And as I said, you'll be making parts that basically do make up for the weaknesses of each other. So we did lose a little bit of dirty air tolerance there. We did lose a little bit of brake cooling, but again, we gained 10% brake cooling from the suspension, so we're just losing a little bit of that gain. And for the rear wing here, we can actually do something like this, which would more than enough make up for the loss of dirty air tolerance. Again, it's not going to be too great. We're still going to have to focus on dirty air tolerance later on, but we're going to get a lot of DRS effectiveness, a lot of acceleration, a lot of top speed, which kind of makes up for the losses over there. And the last combination is going to be, of course, your side pods and chassis. And the side pod is very good for, as I said, engine cooling. And it's also surprisingly good for high-speed cornering here. So let's say that we sacrifice top speed. We focus on middle and high-speed cornering through the airflow here. Airflow here is basically something that you want to combine, if you can, with downforce, as it gives a boost to the downforce here. If we, for instance, were to focus front instead, we'd still get more boost there. But generally for your side pods, it's going to be far more efficient to focus on your high speed ones. And of course, our engine cooling. We're going to lose a bit of top speed here, as you can see. But again, top speed isn't super important. It's going to be important, of course, with top speed tracks. But what we would probably like to focus on, particularly early on, is our cornering ability. So this is going to be our side pod, loses us half a kph in top speed, but generally gives us big boosts everywhere else. And lastly, our chassis here, it only has 3 stats. We can sacrifice a little bit of engine cooling right now, so we could potentially just make something like this. We'd basically just get about 6% increase in our engine cooling ability, but we'd make up a little bit for top speed that we lost, and we'd also get a lot of cornering. But honestly, what I would probably do is something like this, where we'd lose a little bit more top speed, which means that if we do all of these 6 parts, we're going to be losing a lot of our top speed, but we're going to be gaining a lot of cornering ability in exchange. Particularly here on this chassis of ours. We'll lose a little bit of engine cooling, but generally I think with cornering still being kind of king, that this should be a decent way to, say, get your car started. And this is actually what I'm going to be doing for the Alfa Romeo save. I did a different thing for the AlphaTauri speedrun. You can have a look at that as online. But the Alfa Romeo save should be up within a few days, and you can see how it works there. But that is basically my quick guide to how design works. Of course, as I said, the only other thing you need to be worried about is your money. And honestly, as long as you run standard designs, you should be fine. But as I said, the main concern is going to be how often you crash, if you take out any powertrain components by crashing, and generally just how that works, particularly because of the fact that manufacturing is kind of expensive. Chassis being chassis being $500,000, and well, the rest of them being 225,000 or above. So with that in mind, you are going to have to try and balance things a little bit there. If you crash a lot, you might need to tune down your drivers. But generally here with the cost gap too, at some point you're going to get regulation changes, and you don't really want to design too much into those regulations because you are going to have a drop next season. So let's say once you hit 40 to 30 million remaining on your cost cap, you might want to just switch over completely to research. Now, I think I have explained everything that I wanted to here. It's not super in-depth, I know. It's basically just a general how it works. If you want to go more in-depth, see exactly how things work, Mike Takumi has made a pretty amazing guide that I've used to fill in the blanks in my knowledge. I've tested out a lot of this myself, but it has been amazing for just filling in the blanks. And if you are more curious about how this stuff works, or just want general more knowledge about it, go and check out the guide that I've linked in the description. It is really, really good. Man's been spending a lot of time testing, and it's probably going to be updated continuously going forwards with new information. So hopefully it will be a good read. But yeah, this has been my quick guide to design. Development, again, that's probably how I would develop the 6 parts. I would probably kind of keep the balance there. Might focus a little bit more on getting the top speed back later on. But as I said, we'll be doing this alpha save, and we'll be seeing how exactly that pans out. It might be out tomorrow. It might not. It should be out in a couple of days. But yeah, hope you liked this little introduction, maybe. A little bit more in-depth design guide than my first one, and I hope that it has helped you. But again, if you have any questions, feel free to ask them in the comments. If you want to see a little bit more complicated, well, a little bit more information, a little bit more complicated information about how the system works, feel free to read up that guide by Mike. It's amazing. Again, thank you all for watching. Hope you've enjoyed, and hope to see you around next time. If this helped you, like and subscribe. Bye-bye.